Hello everyone, here we will see the notes of The Cherry Orchard, written by Anton Chekhov. If you did not subscribe my channel, please subscribe for more videos. Introduction. Anton Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard focuses on the main theme of social mobility at the dawn of Russia's 12th century. Mrs. Raneskia represents member of the now bankrupt upper class who were struggling to survive. In the beginning, she is still mourning the death of her son and dealing with a lover who mistreats her, all of which gives her suicidal thoughts. She is therefore unable to talk the advice of savvy businessman Lopakin, who has risen from peasant. Anton Chekhov. Anton Chekhov was a famous Russian playwright and short story writer during the last half of the 19th century. The Cherry Orchard is one of the most famous plays and it also the last. Interestingly enough, Anton Chekhov intended for the Cherry Orchard to be a comedy, but the director staged it as a tragedy. The subject matter of the play is heavy, but there are comical elements, especially in regards to Madame Raneskia, as brother addiction to billiards. Another interesting fact about the play is that it is only play in which Anton Chekhov included a gun, but never had a gun fired you but never had the gun fired. You may have heard about Chekhov's gun, a dramatic principle which states that every single item put into a play or story should have relevance. Therefore, a playwright should never introduce a gun into a play if he doesn't intend for it to go off a same point. Filmmakers still adhere to the Chekhov's gun rule today, though Chekhov himself broke his own rule in the Cherry Orchard. Lopakin, who has risen from the peasant class to find wealth as a merchant. Lopakin advises that she destroy her cherry orchard and lease the land, thus maintaining her status. The orchard, however, is a part of her noble upbringing, which means she cannot part with it. Lopakin eventually buys the cherry orchard and the entire estate for himself when it is auctioned off. This symbolizes the extent of Mrs. Raneskia's loss and the ruin of her aristocratic way of life. As the family members go their separate ways at the end, the uncertainty of their future in this new world is marked by the sound of the cherry trees being chopped down. The play takes place over 4 acts on Mrs. Ranikya's estate, which includes the house and accompanying property. The storylines begin in May and continue into August of the same year. In the opening scene, the Gaev household anxiously awaits Mrs. Tranikya's arrival from Paris. Anya had earlier traveled to Europe with Charlotte to accompany her mother back, but their return is marred by the family's financial problems. Varya mentions that the estate is up for sale and most of the characters seem helpless to do anything about it. The wealthy Lopakin is there and he fondly remembers Mrs. Ranikya's kindness when he was a poor peasant boy. He proposes a simple solutions. The family should chop down the cherry orchard on their land and leave the property as cottages. The older aristocrats, including Leonid Gaev, laugh at this suggestion, unable to fathom a world without all of their luxurious possessions. Trofimov enters, which brings sadness to Mrs. Ranitskia. Trofimov had tutored her son Grisha, who'd drowned 6 years earlier. Mrs. Raniskia departs, leaving the family to fret about their financial situation. Leonid Gaev hopes to borrow money or receives assistance from a wealthy aunt, which makes the others feel slightly hopeful. As Anya goes off to bed, Trofimov stares after her adoringly. Charlotte Epido Yasha and Danyasha are a field near the cherry orchard. Epicodo fir- first with Danyasha but is rejected. Danyasha instead dealers her love to Yasha, who toys with her and dismisses her when Mrs. Ranitsky and Gayev arrive. Lopakin accompanies the pair and begs them to reconsider leasing the cherry orchard and land around it. They spum the idea, calling it rubbish and vulgar. Mrs. Raniskia laments her fate, mentioning her ongoing disastrous affair with another man. The man followed her to Paris and eventually robbed and deserted her, combined with the fact that she is not over her son's death. These hardships cause her to have suicidal thoughts. Out of the many characters in the play, it's perhaps the cherry orchard itself that takes center stage. Its presence is constantly felt, and its eventually fate adds to drama throughout from the symbolic standpoint. The orchard represents the old aristocratic ways of Mrs. Ranikyas and her family. Although once fertile, it now serves no practical purpose. Even the cherries are not harvested and sold as in the decades past. Mrs. Raniskia too is past her period usefulness. The world has moved on, especially after the liberation of Russian serfs with no real income. Noble families are going broke, and business minded merchants like Lopakin are succeeding. Place. The destruction of the orchard at the end of the play is hunting last image that accompanies the departure of the Gayev's family. As the cherry trees are destroyed, they too march off to their uncertain fate and perhaps existential reign. Madame Lubo and Rena Raneskia owns the family estate with the cherry orchard. She is depressed about of person 5 years earlier, her son 5 years earlier, and has been living in Paris with a lover who does not train her well. After Raniskia attempts suicide, her youngest daughter Anya, 17 years old, travels to Paris to bring her mother back to the family estate. Anya is a good person and loves Trofino more, deceased brother's tutor. Raniskia had a second daughter, Varya, 27 years old, who is adopted. The play never explains why Raniskia adopted Varya, which is odd because it would have been unusual for an aristocrat to adopt a child. At the time, Varya is very religious and controlling, and she acts as a housekeeper for the estate. Raniskia also has a brother, Leonardo Andreevich Gayev, who is funny and addicted to billiards, which is an example of the luxurious of aristocrat class. Peter Tofino is a perpetual student into left-wing politics and Arya's love interest. He also tutored Raneskia's deceased son, so his presence is hard for her to handle sometimes. Raneskia's other friends include Boris Bovisvich, Simon Pischik, another landowner, and Permolai Alexevich Lopakin, a merchant who has formerly from the lower class. Charlotte Ivanova is a Gaius governess. She watches out for Anya. Conclusion. A middle class neighbor of Madame Raniskia, Lopakin is a child of peasants who has recently made his way in the world and acquired quite a bit of wealth. When Lopakin was a boy, Madame Raniskia showed him kindness on several occasions when he suffered at the hands of his drunkard of a father. Now Lopakin attempts to repay her kindness by helping her strategize to keep a child on her family's ancestral home and sprawling estate. To do so, Lopakin says the beautiful and expensive cherry orchard must be cut down and parceled off in the parts of land. Basically, it is a Russian drama, so names are familiar or reaches related to the Russian language. So while pronouncing, if it any mistake, please forgive me. If you like my content, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.